Hello, welcome to Quackalope. Thank you for being here. Today, I'm bringing you a overview and strategy guide for Dark Blood by Meeple Pug. Now, if you're asking why I'm doing a quick strategy guide when the game isn't even in your hands, because this is a prototype copy that I'm working with, and the game is available to back over on GameFound right now, link as always in the top of the video description, well, here's the answer. One, this game has a lot of cool little mechanic elements that you can twist, turn, and start to discover as you explore the game. And you haven't had a chance to explore the game, but I have. And so I want to share those. And two, as I talk through the way that each one of these factions plays and dive into the core mechanics engine behind Dark Blood, you'll get a sense as to whether or not this game is going to be right for you or wrong for you. If this is one that you want to back and get to the table as soon as it arrives, or if it's one that you want to hold off on and maybe play at a convention or get to the table with some of your friends in a game group down the road. Because certainly, this is one of those games that you should try and experience, but the question of theme and of core mechanic systems is different from experience. So, let's go ahead and dive into this. Now, for the record, this is a sponsored video, and we're grateful to Meeple Pug for working with us on this. We also have a full 3-player gameplay video where we show the entire experience of the game and how it actually functions on the table. So make sure you swing over to our YouTube channel in order to check out that other video. With that, let's dive into Dark Blood. Now, my first assumption is that you don't know much about this game because this is going to be one of the earliest strategy videos for it. So I'll do about 60 seconds giving you a recap on how it functions. This is a victory point scoring game. You're trying your best to accomplish a variety of tasks, from upgrading your personal asymmetric player powers and abilities to controlling and dominating the land by blind bidding blood every round in order to slowly earn victory points by desecrating the 5 regions available on the board. Each one of your turns is going to be composed of you playing out your miniatures in order to have dominance in these 5 regions, and then, depending on how many you have in each specific region, taking them one at a time with other players at the table in order to take very important corresponding actions. From actions that are unique to your character on the board, to resource gathering here on the main tableau, to sacrificing and hanging peasants on the tree over here in the corner. There's a lot of things that you can do and a lot of ways that you can manipulate and twist the engine that you're playing with. The core heart and soul of Dark Blood comes down to the way that each faction integrates with and manipulates the state of the game. Some of them looking to gain more blood, which is going to be a resource that you use to do bids in order to earn points by desecrating the land. Some of them that can place down sigils, which determine where the desecration is actually going to happen, and make it so you don't need as much blood in order to manipulate and win those final votes. It's also public information, which helps you out. Some of the factions are going to be aggressive, stealing resources and killing other players' cultists, while other factions are going to work at manipulating and shifting villagers around the board, getting benefits by drawing tiles from this lovely bag and resources back as the game progresses. The real joy, the real adventure of Dark Blood, the thing that you're looking for, if you're determining whether or not this is a game that you want to play, comes down to how every round kind of resets itself and then allows you to re-explore and re-experience it. The board here is going to be randomized. The 4 locations outside of the church are going to be shuffled, and you're going to have different tiles and resources that pop out, potentially spawning more villagers or giving you more control of each location. Then you're going to go through a process of placing out the cultists that you have available in sequences of 1, 2, or 3 at a time, depending on how many are already there, in order to control these regions. After everyone has placed out their cultists, they're then going to call them back, taking actions and shuffling everything, right? Gaining resources, unlocking abilities, and preparing either for later rounds or trying to grab all the early game victory points you can because you don't think you're going to win that final battle. You're going to play through a total of 5 rounds, with 4 of those rounds having a blind bid for blood, where you reveal your hand and desecrate one of these spaces, flipping the available special ability card and making it so that that place won't count towards victory point scoring later on in the game. It's going to be a slow march until that final 4th bidding phase, that 5th round of the game, where you close off position 4 and the church here, position 5, and then you tally up all of your victory points. Everything you do here is worthwhile, but the points are few and far between, with an average scoring game being somewhere in the teens. Every time you grab a point, you want to hold on to it as tight as you can before other players start ripping it from your grubby little fingers. So, let's talk about our tips and tricks, the 10 general principles you should be coming into this game with in mind. First, be mean and be careful. Plan out where you want to play, but don't hold back from being vindictive to the other players at the table. This isn't necessarily a take-that game, meaning that every action you take is not about ruining other players' turns, but it is a very content-aware game, in the lens of something like an area control or a tactical war game in some circumstances. You might be siphoning resources from another player, killing some of their cultists, or shifting some villagers out of the way so that they can't utilize them. Knowing how other players are positioning themselves on the board, knowing where they might be trying to find or gain an advantage, and knowing how you can use your faction's unique abilities to ruin theirs or prevent them from ruining yours is central to the heart of the game. So, if you're coming, have your knives out, and be ready to stab some friends in the back. Number 2, first place is not necessarily the best. We have a hierarchy track here that will score you a lot of points at the very end of the game if you're in first place position. It will also be the tiebreaker, so sometimes, strategically, this can be a very important place to play in. However, if you're in first place, early or mid in the game, you'll find yourself in a little bit of an awkward situation where you're the first person to put out one of your cultists into an empty location. The entire board has been reset, resources have become made available, and you have to decide where the challenge starts. And other players then can respond to you. You've already spent some of the cultists that you have available, and other players get to put out 2 of their own. Or, if there's already 1 and 2 there, 3 of their own in the next turn. You might find that the game round has moved and you've only been able to place 1 meeple out or 1 cultist out into a location that you really desperately wanted. So being mid to late in the game gives you more information early on where you strategically can place, while being first allows you, if you have the cultists, to control the battlefield, and of course gives you a lot of victory points and breaks ties throughout the course of play. I would advise being somewhere towards the lower third, maybe second or third place if you're playing a 4-player game, or even third place itself if you're playing a 3-player game, so that you can plan with care and accuracy, so you can control regions as they pop out, but always be prepared to sacrifice and hang a peasant by the tree in order to break ties. Because this map will resolve based on these signposts, meaning that location 1 resolves before location 2, 3, 4, and 5. So if you're tied down here in the church, for instance, you might just want to hang a villager before you get to it, or moments before you get to it, so that by the time you're playing in that location, you'll be the first person to act, giving you access to the best resources or whatever early manipulation you need to do, like sacrificing and shoving 3 of your opponent's people back onto their board, eliminating their option to play at all. Number 3, blood and cultists are probably the most significant resources in the game for everyone playing. Now, each faction is also going to have resources that they lean more heavily on. If you're playing, for instance, with the Demonologist over here, sulfur is going to be one of those, or the Necromancer is going to be looking for silver. But every faction, really, wants blood and cultists. Cultists are the meeples they get to play. They're the ones that give them more control of the board, and they're what you get to sacrifice if or when necessary to harvest and use some of your more powerful abilities, again, depending on the factions and what special powers you have unlocked. So, if you see other players starting to grow in power, meaning they have 5, 6, or 7 cultists available to play, it might be worthwhile to kill a few of them. Keep them a little bit more balanced. And if you have an opportunity to get and gain blood, to toss it away in your secret little knapsack here, do so. Having more blood is almost never a bad thing. Moving now to number 4, placement. Pay attention to where you put out your meeples here on the board, where your cultists are going to be taking actions. One of the core elements of this is the fact that we resolve the game from position 1 through position 5 means that unlike other programming style games, you actually get more information as the game progresses forward, as opposed to less information. For instance, if we were doing a deck of cards here and you had a programmable stack of actions, in a classic programming game, action 5 is going to be done with more randomness and more chaos than action 1 would have been, because I kind of know where the board state is when I play action 1, but action 5, so many things have changed. Every other player has impacted the state of the game. That's not quite the same here, because you're not manipulating other regions, you're really messing with the region that you're in. So if I place out a decent number of cultists here in position 1, and maybe have a few scattered in the earlier regions, and I have something important that I want to accomplish, like upgrading a location on my board, or gaining that specific resource I need, like sulfur again for the Demonologist, to murder or kill or sacrifice any number of other enemies, then I actually might be able to do that here in position 5. Even though chaos and randomness has spread across the board, my locations on my personal playing field are safe, they're protected. So as long as my cultists are still out there for me to use, and for the most part they will be, or they should be, thinking of my gameplay specifically, they might not always be, as long as they're still out there for me to use, and I've planned my early actions well, it doesn't really matter what other players have done. I can still accomplish whatever great task I have set before me. Moving on to the final part of this, and this is going to be kind of a big overarching idea. Know who you're playing and know who your enemies are playing. There's 4 core factions in the game that we have here, and I'm going to quickly go through some of the core mechanics and how they function. Each of them has this board here, this star board, with a set of 4 advanced tiles that'll be coming on and off of the game state. These little tokens that go into this draw bag and place down control markers as they get drawn out throughout every round of the game. And as you unlock them, you get to flip these tiles to decide what side you want them to exist on. Again, at the top of every round, you get to reorder these as well. So these do get covered up, but they can be insanely powerful if you're able to get them and utilize them when they're available. You also have your locations up here on the top of the board, where you have resources that'll be spent in order to upgrade these different sections. Like, for instance, 2 sulfur and a bone here will allow me to upgrade one of these 2 locations, flipping it over onto its dark side and giving me some special strength, power, or ability. Now, each of these factions manipulates the game in some unique way. So understanding how they might be able to mess with you is really important to understanding the flow of the game and to being able to be competitive with it as it continues. So, starting here with probably the most complicated cult-like faction that exists, we have the Doomsayers. The Doomsayers are going to focus on shifting your little villagers around the board, gaining them resources, and also doing something that no other faction so far does, drawing from this bag to gain resources for themselves, to potentially kick their enemies' abilities out of this bag, returning them to their enemies' boards as such, and potentially, depending on what they have unlocked, gaining blood, silver, or other resources for doing so. So, shifting, manipulating, and playing a more defensive game overall is how the Doomsayers are going to win. It's how they're going to secure dominance. The most powerful ability here, in my opinion, is going to be Cassandra's Truth upgraded to Nostradamus' Legacy, and the Omens updated to the Prophecies so that you can summon out your giant miniature, your leader, your cult-like Doomsayer, the upside-down cross. This allows you to then take an action drawing 4 tokens from the bag, and depending on what you have Eschatos turned to, you can either gain blood or place down sigils, which are the way that you control and win some of those late-stage victory points. So, very important, very, very powerful. Moving over to the Necromancers here. The Necromancers are going to focus heavily on generating and destroying other players and destroying villagers off the board. The most powerful thing that the Necromancers are focused on is really limiting how much access players have to utilizing villagers' actions, because these little guys are resources that everyone shares, and our big guy here doesn't really need them. He doesn't need them to summon more cultists. He can raise the bones from the dead. He doesn't need them to be alive at all. If you're playing as a Necromancer, reducing the total number of villagers from 8 down to 4 or 5 early in the game can really throw a wrench in how other players' engines run and operate. If you're playing as them, though, you need to pay attention to a few important elements. First off, silver is a resource you really want to gain and harvest early on. So spread yourself thin, grab as much silver as you can, because almost all of your abilities are going to be focused in on it. And the most powerful ability you have, again, in my opinion, is going to be Contagion, upgraded here to Pandemic in the bottom left side of your board. Returns 3 enemy cultists from a location. You can only do it once per round, but if you have this upgraded early on, that can be a major debuff to other players' course of play, their operation. They might have more power than you on the board, but you can actually prevent them from utilizing the amount of cultists they have by just telling them to return home or swallowing them in the earth, however you thematically want to keep it in mind. This is a faction that focuses on manipulating, gaining blood, and getting rid of villagers. Let's move over here to our Warlocks. The Warlock faction is a very aggressive faction, kind of the counterpart to the Doomsayers that are playing a little bit more strategic and a little bit more defensive. The Warlock faction just kind of wants to murder everyone and can get a lot of blood by doing so. Focusing down here on the most powerful ability, we have the Ashes and Dust flipped over to the Summoning ability, which allows you to steal 3 resources from an enemy cult. The other side here allows you to destroy 3 resources from an enemy cult. Very powerful, but not quite as good as stealing, because resources can be kind of hard to come by, and they're how you actually upgrade your boards and do most of your other actions. So, upgrading this quickly allows you to debuff another faction by ripping hard-fought resources off of their tableau. Along with that, if you've actually been able to place out your large Striga character, starting to kill and murder your enemies, which are some of the other core abilities that you have, and kill, again, is different from consume or return. You're actually going to be taking them out of play. They'll have to rehire them, which usually costs blood or allows them to interact, or necessitates that they interact with villagers to do so. If you have the Stringla out here on the tableau, you'll be gaining blood by doing that as well. So, this faction's focused on ruthless, violent attacks. You want to get up, aggressive, and in your opponent's faces as quickly as you can. And then finally, we're going to be pulling the Demonologist tile over here. We're going to be taking a look at them. The Demonologist is going to be focused on playing out sigils. Sigils are the skulls that determine where a location is going to be destroyed, when and how it's going to score victory points, and how much blood or how much credit you get before that final bid at the end of the round. This is a very interesting faction because they're actually able to preserve the skulls or the sigils that they've placed down, giving them more control and more dictation over how the game state progresses from phase to phase. If there's a card out here that they want to have available later on in the game, they can kind of prevent it from getting destroyed early on. And if they strategically win or lose battles or bids throughout the course of play, they can end up in that final round having a lot of skulls active, giving them a lot of power. One of the most powerful abilities they have is going to be their end upgradable ability here, which is called Limbo, which allows you to count your skulls for 3 blood instead of 2, giving you a major advantage over other players. Along with that, they have a big sulfur focus. So if you're playing as the Demonologist, try to get some sulfur into your resource pools early on to allow you to use Satanic Possession or Anthemia. Consume to place down a sigil, or consume to kill an enemy and gain your own cultists. Now, the 2 most powerful factions when it comes to generating and utilizing cultists are going to be our Warlock and our Demonologists. The 2 most powerful factions when it comes to manipulating villagers and kind of controlling the board state is going to be the Doomsayers and the Necromancers. Every faction wants some degree of resource, but our Warlock over here is going to be ripping them from the grasp of everyone else. So be strategic with when and how you acquire and use those resources. The final piece of advice I have, if you're going to be diving into this game, is be careful, be precise, and don't just do things for the sake of doing things. Yeah, having a little bit more of anything is worthwhile, but if you're going to be doing that, just go for blood or get some more cultists out, because it'll give you an advantage on the next round or the next phase of the game. However, resources aren't safe. Cultists on the board aren't safe. Villagers aren't even safe. Nothing is guaranteed, and every action you do needs to be thought through and perfectly executed. If you're gaining 2 or 3 resources, don't let them sit on your board. You want to be able to use those things either for a special ability or to upgrade a location here on your tableau. Do things purposefully. Do things targeted. Because if you don't, other players will take advantage of it to their own benefit. Thank you for watching. Thank you for being here. Whatever the case, though, whatever you do, remember to do the important thing. If you're backing Dark Blood, sleep with the lights on. This is a weird, twisted, macabre game. We'll see you next time. Bye.